have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And we have a lot of marriage news for you, as usual, but in a first, a religious denomination is suing the state, in this case, North Carolina, challenging the validity of the amendment there, barring same-sex marriage.
I think they have a mixed argument there. Yep. But we have a victory for same-sex couples in Alaska.
Bad news from the U.S. Navy that booted a seaman for transitioning from woman to man.
And bad news from the Boy Scouts yet again, who have denied a summer job to a 19-year-old Eagle Scout who they have discovered is gay.
Better news from the U.S. Department of Education, which issued a guidance affording students much more protection from harassment based on gender identity and expression.
In local news here in New York, a street in Queens has been dedicated to the founders of PFLAG.
The group Queer Nation has launched a new campaign, ENDA is not enough.
No, ENDA is not equal.
Not equal. Right, oh, I'm sorry.
Also, ENDA is not enough.
A lot of E's there. And I have my glasses on.
Well,
Actually,
we
I have
various
my friend George's
slogans.
glasses on. But go ahead.
Really?
Go ahead.
Why?
Because I forgot mine this weekend, and he lent these to me, and it's all right.
Okay.
On and on.
A South African doctor who tortured hundreds of gay soldiers in the 70s and 80s is finally sent to prison in Canada.
There's a new CEO at the Gay Men's Health Crisis.
Finally, and it was cross-dressing week on Broadway with a new play by Harvey Fierstein and a revival of Hedwig and the Angry Inch, starring Neil Patrick Harris, both Tony nominated.
And Daniel Radcliffe is here in New York in the wonderful Cripple of Inishmaan that he did in London, and another Harry Potter alumnus had a show off Broadway.
But we start in North Carolina, where there's a very interesting new lawsuit. There are lawsuits all over the United States challenging anti-same-sex marriage laws. But this one in North Carolina, this new one, has been filed by the United Church of Christ and some other clergy from other denominations.
And some local same-sex couples.
Exactly.
And the reason it's unique, again, it's challenging the state amendment against same-sex marriage, but they're saying it violates the religious beliefs of observers who support same-sex marriage and the clergy who want to perform them.
Now, there's something special.
And this is the entire denomination filing this suit,
yes.
Which is, by the way, the United Church of Christ is 1 million strong and has about, I think, 1,500 churches or something.
Well, there are a couple of aspects to this suit, a couple of arms to it. One is a direct challenge to the anti-same-sex marriage constitutional amendment in North Carolina on the usual equal protection grounds and things like that. But there is a special law in North Carolina that says churches may not perform marriages or ceremonies of union for couples who don't have a marriage license, and that you can be penalized for this.
Has anyone ever been penalized for this?
Not that I know of.
I kind of passed a similar one like this in Alabama once.
They've been intimidated out of performing some of these ceremonies by the potential consequences of doing so. So rightly, I think the church is saying, you can't tell us we can't perform a ceremony of union.
Religious freedom, religious freedom. The right wing, you're always squawking about it.
So I think they will win that, but that alone is not going to give them the right to perform marriages that are civilly legal.
Right, but they're saying we do this for other heterosexual couples. We should be able to do it. You're violating our religious freedom to do it for...
To do a ceremony of union without a marriage license, but that doesn't...
But they are also ministers of the state. That's the problem in this country, is that religious ministers are also ministers of the state in the marriage ceremony.
Yes.
They sign the license.
But the state can interfere with their ability to conduct a civil marriage ceremony while not being allowed to interfere with their right to conduct a ceremony of union.
And they're challenging that.
Right. So I think they will win on the ability to do any religious practice they want in terms of conducting a ceremony of union or anything they want to call a marriage. But in terms of having the right to conduct a marriage that then becomes a civilly legal marriage is right back to the usual lawsuits about equal protection.
Which is
and
also
all of
part
that.
of the case.
So I think it's good that they challenge this local law, but I don't think it goes beyond that in terms of their special condition.
All right, and we got a good decision in Alaska from the state Supreme Court there. They ruled that the state violated the state constitution by denying a same-sex couple equal access to a property tax exemption. In a heterosexual married couple, they get a $150,000 exemption if one of them is a senior or a veteran. But in gay couples, that exemption is limited to half the value of the home. So we're getting some...
yes, equal treatment. Yeah. Now, Alaska, turns out, we announced last week, because we had read it, that there were 4 states in the United States that did not have lawsuits pending on legalizing same-sex marriage. It turns out that Alaska is one of them. Also now Montana and North Dakota. Alaska, Montana, North Dakota, not any southern states, by the way, are the only states now without lawsuits, because the 4th state, South Dakota, now has had a suit filed for 3 couples, some of whom were denied licenses they applied for to marry in South Dakota. One couple has gone to Minnesota and been married legally there by the mayor of Minneapolis, and gone back and applied for recognition of their marriage in South Dakota. So we're now down to just 3 states, Alaska, Montana, and North Dakota. This is a notice to those of you living there that the field is open for you to file your lawsuit.
Anybody can file a case. There are private lawyers doing this, national organizations doing it.
As we've seen in, for instance, Florida, where there are 5 suits pending. And now there are multiple suits pending in Pennsylvania, where a woman...
And by the way, before you leave Florida, the judge there won't let an anti-gay group intervene in the case there.
Yes, but they can file an amicus brief, but they can't intervene as major players.
You got that, right wing? Because I know you're loyal viewers of the show.
Yeah, well, I'm sure some are. In Pennsylvania, a woman has sued for recognition of her legal marriage in Connecticut a couple of years ago because her wife died. She was hit with a state tax bill and is now
$11,000.
Is suing Pennsylvania to get out of that and to be treated equally with married heterosexual
And she
couples.
says, basically, I know it's only $11,000, but she says, I believe if we chip away at things, we'll get there.
Well, it's interesting. It's the reverse of the Edie Windsor case, because she, of course, was recognized as married in New York and did not have the estate tax bill. But the feds were charging her, and that's why she brought suit and brought down DOMA on the basis of equal treatment on that tax law.
Now, in Ohio, same-sex couples filed a federal suit in Cincinnati. It's filed by the same private lawyer who won the case about recognizing legal same-sex marriages from other states. The lead plaintiff in this one, Michelle Gibson, has multiple sclerosis and can't travel to another state to marry. The state attorney general, Mike DeWine, a bad guy, said they started with death certificates. They moved on to birth certificates, and now we're moving to the whole thing. That's a quote. He says, it's not unusual. Mike DeWine.
Whoa, thank you. In the Sixth Circuit, which covers Ohio and Michigan and a couple of other states, has denied the request from the state of Michigan to go straight to a full appeals court en banc hearing of the case there.
And in Tennessee, the Sixth Circuit stayed the good decision that we got there about out-of-state same-sex marriages.
So there are little movements here and
how
everywhere.
about that judge in Oregon?
Go ahead.
Well, in this case, in the same-sex marriage case, it turns out the judge is raising a kid with a same-sex partner.
Yeah, he's gay. How about Texas? A judge there has ruled that the marriage law discriminates against gay couples, but an appeals court has stayed the decision pending that appeal.
In Utah, the Attorney General wants a federal judge to kick the case to the state Supreme Court before deciding if the state must recognize the 1,200 same-sex marriages that were already performed there.
In Idaho, a veteran cemetery is refusing to bury the legal wife of a Navy veteran. They wanted to be buried together. The veteran cemetery is saying no. I suspect that will be appealed too.
And in Iowa, one congressional district Republican Party committee dropped their stipulation that marriage is only between a man and a woman. But in Maine, the GOP state party is still opposed to same-sex marriage, which has been legal there for a year now.
Now, but here's one thing about both these statements by the local Republican parties. They both say the government shouldn't interfere in marriage. And I am dying to get face to face with one of these people who says this and say, so wait a minute, you don't want any government benefits as married couples? You don't want any
just make it a religious institution or something?
Yeah, you don't want pension benefits going to a spouse. You don't want exemption from estate taxes. What do you mean by the government shouldn't interfere in marriage?
That was that idiot Mike Bloomberg's old line. The government shouldn't tell you who you can marry. When he wouldn't support same-sex marriage, he acted like the government shouldn't have anything to do with it. Well, of course it does.
Well,
it's a civil institution.
The government shouldn't tell you beyond certain basic things who you should marry, but to say the government shouldn't be involved in marriage is a whole different thing.
It's hypocritical.
It is.
Well, in Virginia, at Old Dominion University, Tim Bostic, he's one of the plaintiffs in the Virginia marriage case.
Yes.
He was denied tenure in the English department where he was a star and he was coordinator of the teacher prep program. School authorities deny the decision had anything to do with his role in the marriage case, and the tenure committee had unanimously recommended him. Anyway, rather than appeal, Bostic resigned and said he will re-enter the public school system where he'd rather be.
Yes, where he'd rather be.
Screw you, Old Dominion.
In Tennessee, a place called Mint Spring Farms has changed its mind about marriage. They were asked to host a commitment ceremony for two men who were Iraq war veterans, and they said, oh, no, we're not having anything to do with that. And then they sat down with the guy, with the Quality
local group.
Yeah, Quality Tennessee. Someone's calling Andy.
I thought I'd turn that off.
And they had a conversation, and they said, you know what, we've changed our mind. We want to be welcoming to all, and we are now going to welcome people who want to come here and have commitment ceremonies, which is all you can have in Tennessee yet.
Please turn your phone off, all right, everybody, while we're talking, okay?
Now, there are updates on the Joe Becker book about Chad Griffin and the Prop 8 case. As we told you last week, there has been a great outcry by LGBT leaders around the country, mostly against the book and saying that it may be a good description of the Prop 8 case, but to generalize beyond that and forget the whole rest of the marriage movement is ridiculous and insulting and offensive.
If the author, Joe Becker, a woman, by the way, who, J.O., had not started out on the first page by comparing Chad Griffin of the Human Rights Campaign with Rosa Parks, I think the reactions would not have been so hot. That just like inflamed people.
Well, it should have.
To the point that Chad Griffin, wrote a piece in The Advocate, finally defending himself. When we talked about this last week, he had not issued a statement. Well, he didn't defend himself. He just said, I stand on the shoulders of giants.
Well, he said that, first of all,
I'm no Rosa Parks.
He said that the criticism had a profound effect on him, and he said, I have nothing in common with the trailblazing courage of Rosa Parks. Sure, and it would have been easy for Joe Becker to write it differently and acknowledge up front that this was just one chapter, one case, but she extrapolated. HRC itself sent a form letter to members who wrote them complaining letters about the book, saying we recognize everyone's work, we work with everyone. And Becker was supposed to do an event at HRC and canceled out of it, although she is appearing in bookstores.
It was a private event. We don't know if she was in there
Big
or not.
donors.
She could have come in on the back door. Speaking of HRC, they are now opening offices at a theater near you in Mississippi, Alabama, and Arkansas to bring equality to the South. That sounds a little condescending. It's part of their Protect One America campaign. Look, all I'm concerned about with this...
Project One America.
Project One America, I'm sorry. Project One America. My concern would be, and the people in these states can speak for themselves, they don't want to be big-footed. The question is whether, they're going to maintain local control over these campaigns.
Those questions were asked as soon as this was announced, and HRC again put out a statement and said they've hired this guy, Brad Clark, he's been working with them and he's now taking on this campaign, and he's evidently highly regarded. And he put out a statement saying, look, we have been working on this for months. We've been working with local groups. We're working with allies. We're working with the local LGBT activists, and we took a while to announce this because we were putting all that in place.
All I have to say is when HRC comes to town, watch your wallet.
They are hiring 20 staff for this. And in Mississippi, where, all these places do have vibrant movements.
Right. Southern Equality.
I'd like to know what the campaign for Southern Equality thinks of all this and whether they've been working with them. In Mississippi, store owners are putting stickers on their stores saying we don't discriminate after the legislature there passed their religious exemptions bill.
In South Carolina, in the town of Lata, this is where the mayor fired the sheriff for being a lesbian, although she was also investigating one of his appointments. It's a 4 traffic light town, folks, but there was a big rally around the lesbian sheriff there, and that's very, very encouraging.
Well, the town council...
They know her, they like her.
The town council took a unanimous vote of confidence for the fired police chief, Crystal Moore, and they're taking a vote in a month or so about changing the structure of the town leadership so that the mayor will have less power and they will have the power to rehire the police chief. So that's entirely possible, and it's very heartening to see her get that support.
Now, most of our major national groups have been pushing for a long time the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. This is like since the mid-90s. They abandoned a comprehensive amendment to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, 65, those kinds of things, which would add sexual orientation in those days, and now we would say add sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. They abandoned that. They just had an employment bill, and they've been weakening that bill over the years, even though it only lost by 1 vote in 1996 in the Senate. So that's what we're stuck with. So Queer Nation has launched its ENDA is Not Equal campaign. We have a graphic about that. Because ENDA does not cover public accommodations, housing, or education, and it does not ban discrimination in federal programs, and it has an egregious religious exemption.
Well, here's the point. This weakened, backwards, version of, and you might note it's a little provocative by taking the HRC equal sign and putting a red slash through it. This weakened, bad, dangerous version of ENDA has passed the Senate. It awaits a vote in the House. The House, run by Republicans, has said they will not bring it up. Boehner has said we're not taking a vote on this. Meanwhile, the Democrats have been arguing for a vote on it, and they're slowly picking off a Republican or two. They're up to 10, I think.
And the president is refusing to do an executive order which would ban this discrimination among contractors, which would cover 25% of the employment in the United States, and keeps saying, we need ENDA, we need ENDA, we need ENDA. But we're saying, ENDA's a bad bill.
Well, the other thing about the executive order, which is a better version, is it could also be repealed by the next administration. So it's necessary, we want it, but it's not a final answer.
I like our friend Art Leonard's story, the legal scholar, looking at the fact that a federal judge has finally said sex discrimination applies. This has happened months ago. Sex discrimination applies to gays and lesbians, and we could get it through the judiciary.
Especially if that does apply across the board to not only employment, but housing, public accommodations, credit, federal programs, whatever. But the point is, what we are attacking is HRC's push for this bill in its current form.
Yes.
And what we hope is that it will not come up for a vote in the House this year,
Right.
and that we will convince people in a position to do so to write a new bill that is either inclusion in the Civil Rights Act or a standalone, comparable, fully inclusive bill, and get rid of this backwards ENDA. So,
and the argument has always been on the other side of that is if you open up the Civil Rights Act, it goes through like 10 different committees in Congress in both houses.
Well, that's why we're not saying that that's necessarily the answer. We want full civil rights, but it can either be inclusion there or it can be a standalone new sexual orientation and gender identity bill, and anyone else who needs to be included, and do a new bill.
And then 10 years down the road, when nobody cares about this issue anymore and we're long retired, we can just slip ourselves into the Civil Rights Act.
Well, we will be leafleting outside the GLAAD Media Awards this Saturday at the Waldorf in New York at, 4:30
Which side?
p.m.
Going to be on the Park Avenue side?
If the police don't interfere with that. And where do I have that? Yeah. Do you have the note on the time on that?
No. Oh, no, I don't.
Oh, wait, I got it. 4:45 on Saturday at the Waldorf, Park Avenue and 50th Street.
Yeah,
to do an educational leafleting campaign, not an argument, not a picket, just hand all those GLAAD attendees the information about why ENDA is a bad idea and needs to not pass in the House and needs to be rewritten in a better form. And you can get more information on this at the queernationni.org website or at the Queer Nation NY Facebook page.
Right. Let's talk about the Boy Scouts in Arizona.
Okay.
We have a picture of this young man here. His name is Garrett Bryant. He's 19. He's a scout. He's
an Eagle Scout.
Yeah, he writes on Facebook that he's not single or something like that. So some of his friends say, "Oh, what's his name?" And that's how they found out that he's gay. He had been hiding it. He wanted to work in the Scouts. He wanted to take a summer job there. I mean, one of our viewers already wrote me about this and said, he wasn't willing to be out, so that's his problem. What's he associating with this organization for? But it was obviously very important to him, and he needed the summer job. Anyway, they refused to give him the job in the summer camp, and they are saying, "We don't want sex in camp," is their quote on this, which is outrageous. Of course, and nobody should be having sex in camp, even though I guess most people do. Anyway, so the whole issue was he was trying to keep it private. I mean, it's outrageous what they're doing, but it was nice to read in Louisville, Kentucky, their county attorney said you can't fund the Boy Scouts because they still discriminate.
And because Louisville has a local law that forbids discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. So they have told the Boy Scouts they're not going to pay to keep the local pool open later hours for their, pool badge or whatever.
No, come to New York. Mayor de Blasio will open up the public schools to you, as he does to all these right-wing anti-gay churches.
So here's what the Louisville Boy Scouts said. They said, fine, we'll stop our volunteer litter pickup in the parks.
Oh.
Exactly.
Well, it's childish.
The war is on in Louisville.
In Kentucky, there's a print shop there called, well, really they do embroidery, Herald Embroidery it's called. They had a sign outside with a rainbow flag with a slash through it, among other things, and they took that down, but they issued a statement saying, "We will not promote in our embroidery homosexuality, Freemasonry," oh, Catholics are very much against that, I know that, "use of foul language and images which promote immodesty."
But they're very happy to have you bring your gun into their store. It's true. Do we have anything to say about this LA Clippers Donald Sterling business? Aside from the fact that there's a rumor that David Geffen wants to buy the team now.
Not to mention Magic Johnson, who was HIV positive.
Well, the question has been raised about, Brandon Ike and Mozilla, who contributed to the Prop 8 campaign, and how he ended up resigning as the head of Mozilla, versus how people are treating Donald Sterling, and that everyone's very happy to have Donald Sterling forced out, but there was great pushback against gay activists for complaining about Brandon Ike.
Conservative gays signed this big letter, saying Brendan Ike had this free speech rights and we're violating them, but they're not saying anything about this guy's free speech, and some people are saying, hey, he didn't even say it publicly, he said it privately, and it was taped.
Right.
He's a very bad guy.
Very bad.
Talking about Donald Sterling, in a sport which is majority African American, and it became business-wise untenable to have a racist bigot as the head of a team, and he didn't defend himself. He didn't apologize. He didn't do anything.
Well, his wife said at the beginning, his estranged wife,
first
as
his
opposed to
estranged
the
wife
girlfriend.
went after him, and then she defended him.
Then she said, this doesn't represent his thinking at all, what he said on this tape that was caught and made public. But it also raises the question of where our standards are and who gets caught up and who doesn't. The Orlando Magic, another NBA team, is owned by Rich DeVos of the Amway empire, who is one of the chief funders of anti-same-sex marriage laws and constitutional amendments, has said horrendous things about people with AIDS.
And if there were more gay basketball players, that might be an issue. I'm just saying.
Well,
don't let Mr. DeVos try to, become a sponsor of something in our community. There would be an uproar.
Oh, well, believe me, he's not stepping in to be a sponsor of anything in our community. But we hold people accountable in a hit or miss fashion.
What's the old expression? It's all whose ox is gored.
Absolutely. And we are all, as we have discussed off camera, not entirely unguilty of all sorts of things.
In terms of our thoughts, but it's your words and deeds, and if people know about it, and once that tape was released, they knew how blatantly racist he was.
Well, but my point is, we know perfectly well about Rich DeVos and his actions and thoughts, he doesn't get criticized or punished.
Well, some of it is the way you put it. If so he's against same-sex marriage, and for a lot of people that's still a mainstream position. But if he had said, I don't want those faggots to be able to get married, they're disgusting, that might get him in trouble.
Yes, it might not get him forced to sell his team, though.
Well,
At any rate, Jason Collins has been appointed to the Presidential Council on Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition.
See, somebody's going to cut what I just said and take a little piece of that tape and have me saying those bad things and get me fired from the show.
No, I don't think so.
Well,
and the president also appointed an advisory commission on Asian and Pacific Islanders, 14 people, 2 of them are openly gay.
We mourn the loss of Giovanni's Room, the oldest gay bookstore in the country. It's closing May 17th in Philadelphia, where it has been forever.
The owner thought he could sell it, but it turned out he couldn't, so it's going to disappear.
Right.
In Louisiana, a House committee there has rejected a non-discrimination law that would have covered housing. And there was another idea to propose a non-discrimination law, and the sponsor said, I'm not even going to try. I'd get about 3 votes.
The Navy has discharged Landon Wilson, a communications specialist, for simply transitioning from woman to man.
Well, the military does not want transgender people in the military and gets rid of them as soon as they can. However, the Pentagon...
Let me ask a question.
Yes.
Now, this was a person who was transitioning. What if you'd already transitioned and you applied as the new woman that you are, let's say? Could you get in, or they'd throw you out if they found out that you had transitioned?
Probably.
All right.
The Pentagon announced something new this week, a human goals charter. that promotes a culture of inclusion and specifically named lesbian, gay, and bisexual members of the military, but not transgender people, military or civilian employees. You can't even be a civilian employee of the Pentagon and be transsexual or transgender. But civilian people who are transgender or transsexual are supposed to be covered under this sex discrimination decision.
It won't be covered under ENDA.
Yeah. The Pentagon says employing people who are transgender is problematic because they could be serving in austere conditions without medical care that they would need on a continuing basis. This is nonsense.
The U.S. Department of Education has issued a guidance that, and I'm going to quote, Title IX's sex discrimination prohibition extends to claims of discrimination based on gender identity or failure to conform to stereotypical notions of masculinity and or femininity. And the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Education accepts such complaints for investigation, unquote. It's part of a larger guidance on combating sexual violence in schools and the launching of a website. I didn't give the control room this, but it's just called notalone.gov with resources for students and schools.
There may be a ray of light back in South Carolina on the issue of withdrawing funding from South Carolina colleges that made LGBT literature available to students.
Like Fun Home by Alison Bechtel.
Exactly. So there was this, representative there who had proposed all this cutback in funding. But a Republican in the South Carolina Senate has passed a proposed budget that does not include those budget cuts.
You know, it's getting so liberal down there, I think Lindsey Graham's going to come out. In Idaho, protesters again demanded that legislators add the words, that's the name of their campaign, sexual orientation and gender identity, to the state Human Rights Act. Did we talk about this, about the Veterans Cemetery and the woman?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. But that's what the demonstration was about.
And in neighboring Utah, Brigham Young University, which is a wholly owned operation of the Mormon Church, decided to conduct a survey among their students about their sexuality.
So the first question they asked was, are you heterosexual?
Well, it was you can answer.
But with same-sex attractions, or are you heterosexual with no same-sex attractions?
Well, the actual wording was even worse. It was, I am heterosexual but struggle with same-sex attraction.
Yes. And there was
or are you other?
There was an other category for whatever that is.
So they got a lot of pushback on that.
Gay or lesbian.
They wrote a second version of it that said, that offered the option, I consider myself homosexual, bisexual, or transsexual. That didn't go over well with a different segment of the population there. So they ended up with a question that says, do you experience same-sex attraction? Now that got a lot of people angry because they didn't use the word gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transsexual. And I would argue, while it would be nice to ask that question too, that we too rarely ask the question of everybody, do you experience same-sex attraction? Because I think it's much more widely experienced than people acknowledge.
Are they going to share the results with us over there at Brigham Young about how many people with same-sex attraction they got?
I don't think they're even going to read the results themselves.
Well, why are they doing the survey?
Good question.
Well, we've told you a lot about the passing of Jean Manford. It was just about a year ago. She was the founder of the Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. So Danny Drum, who's an out gay city council member out there, very close to her.
In Queens, New York.
In Queens, New York, engineered a thing to rename a street out there for them. And I thought, oh, yeah, it's nice and everything. But I wasn't even going to get out of bed, but I went. And you're out
with or without your glasses.
You're out in North Flushing, Queens. It's sort of a nice suburban area in the middle of a suburban street, like the kind I grew up in Nassau County. And they're naming Jean, Jules, Morty, Manford, P-Flag Way, because together, Jean and Jules, the parents, Morty, the Gay Activist Alliance, they're all dead. Of course, but they formed PFLAG back in 1972.
That's going to be a lot to write on a letter.
Well, that is the limit in terms of the number of letters you can have on a sign. That's they didn't even have the word "and" in there. But sitting out there in front of this home, I mean, but the interesting thing is, the council member out there is Paul Vallone, who was from the Vallone family, not particularly pro-gay. He's one of the last council members to march in the St. Patrick's Day parade, which is anti-gay. He says, oh, they're going to change that, don't worry.
Yeah.
But I was very impressed by what he said at this event.
Paul
Vallone, where he said that he lives on the block. He says, I walk my kids down here, I tell them about PFLAG and who lived here and what they did. And then he said, the parents and friends of lesbians and gays. That's all of us, he says. Anyone who can't understand that, that's their loss. And I thought that was pretty good. So even though I cited him for, and John Dwayne, Tom Dwayne's brother, the out-gay former state senator, he gets up there and he says, you know, our parents were terrible on this stuff, and he's not gay himself, but says, we ran away to this house a lot. Tom had to live here at one point, and they fed us and gave us the strength to be activists. So I was very impressed by that.
Very nice.
And plus the fact that the PFLAG woman from New York took her opportunity at the stage to say, Governor Cuomo, we need the transgender rights bill in New York. You're not doing enough about this. And I really was impressed that she did that, because we don't have a transgender state rights bill.
Well, thank you.
That was nice.
We do have a new anti-bullying bill in Massachusetts, now signed by Massachusetts Governor Patrick Deval. That makes 17 states and the District of Columbia that have anti-bullying bills. Also back in New York, the city of New York has settled...
That's anti-bullying bills with us in it, because there are a lot of anti-bullying bills without us in it.
Yes. In New York City, the city has settled the case of Robert Pinter, who was falsely arrested in a sting at an adult bookstore.
Falsifying charges of prostitution against old men.
Yes.
That's what they were doing, using a young cop.
Yeah. And then having the young cop offer money to the old man.
Very confusing.
Yes.
And it was a sting, and that was a Michael Bloomberg production.
Yes,
to
it was.
bring his name in there again. So they settled the case for $450,000, but most of that is legal fees.
Yeah.
He's only getting 50 G's.
Yep.
And so it's not like he made out like a bandit or anything.
Absolutely
but
not.
I hope it will dissuade the cops from doing this kind of... They were wreaking havoc with people's lives, including tourists who were getting arrested for this. They just picked on anybody.
You know,
it's disgusting.
it goes on. And in fact, there are a couple of lawsuits now in New Jersey. A transgender woman is suing the Bergen City Police Department, and a transgender man is suing the Jersey City Police Department for harassment and horrible treatment and bad false arrests and, you know, being treated like dirt under arrest.
We have friends who are police officers. We do. But, you know, it's one of those professions where you really have to be restrained in the use of power.
Including the chief of the commissioner of the New York City Police, Bill Bratton, who was asked by Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer about his giving permission for the New York City cops to march in the anti-gay St. Patrick's Day parade in uniform as official representatives.
And he says, we're celebrating our Irish heritage, which is not what the parade says its theme is, which is a Catholic private religious procession, anti-gay.
He said, I think it's fair and appropriate.
Terrible.
Which is why we're filing suit.
Right. We are filing suit about that.
Yes. We should file suit against Roger Ailes, too, who runs the Fox News Network. I thought Shepard Smith, Fox reporter, news anchor, had been out for years.
Well, he lives an out gay life. He's seen in gay venues. I mean, that's not hiding.
So Roger Ailes
I don't know that
held
he's made a statement about it.
Well, I've seen him at, you know, NLGJA events and stuff.
Yeah.
So Roger, which are often sponsored by Fox, by the way. Roger Ailes holds a staff picnic at his house, and Shepard Smith comes with his boyfriend, who is a Fox producer. everyone lost their minds, including this guy, Bill Shine, who is a top executive, who flipped out, who is evidently a notorious major homophobe, to quote a Fox employee. And Roger Ailes has demoted Shepard Smith.
Shep, there's a suit in that if you want to bring suit. There is a law in New York about that. It's been around since 1986 in New York City.
He was moved from prime time to afternoon.
Well, he's got to stand up for himself. That's all you can do.
Good news.
It reminds me of, by the way, of what Prince Philip did when he saw some men just kissing on the cheek, greeting each other at a garden party, and he had gay couples banned for a while from such things. That's not true anymore.
Protesteth too much.
Yeah.
In California,
Philip, was he gay?
No, I don't know.
We don't know.
California, the legislature is advancing a bill that would limit the panic defense so that people can't just automatically go into court and say, you know, I freaked out, I killed him. And congratulations to Ray Carey, head of the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, who got arrested as part of a demonstration on immigration reform in D.C.
We need that.
Yeah. Let's move to international news.
Yes. Let's see where
Terrible story out of Pakistan where a guy admitted that he went on to gay websites and lured gay men and killed them.
He tried to get them to convert, to be good and stop doing it, but if they wouldn't do it, he killed them.
He killed them.
Whew. But he's being prosecuted, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Which is not what's happening in some parts of the world. I mean, in Uganda, the law against gays and everything. Now they want to bar NGOs from promoting homosexuality, and they want to put a lot of other restrictions on NGOs who the president perceives as a threat, a political threat to him.
Yes, they are now forbidden to interfere in local politics. Because he wants total control and rule.
And then in Kenya, Ugandan gay refugees are going to Kenya, and even though they have anti-gay laws there too, and they're experiencing anti-gay harassments and violence in the refugee camps in Nairobi. And one of them said, after his experience, "I feel like taking poison."
Yeah.
Because it's just so hopeless.
There was one nice little incident in Uganda. A guy named Neil Gottlieb, who is from California and owns 3 Twins ice cream. We're East Coasters. We're not familiar with that, but that's a clever little name. But he's a mountain climber, and he climbed
a picture of him.
The highest.
Next one.
Next picture. He climbed the highest peak in Uganda.
There he is. Margarita Peak.
And planted a rainbow flag, so that the highest thing in Uganda now is a rainbow flag.
And he said to President Museveni, he said, "If you don't like it, climb up the mountain and take it down."
16,000 feet.
Now, I have to say, Neil, if you really want to be brave, try planting it in downtown Kampala.
Yes. But as long as we had that previous picture, let's go back to that. That is a story from Japan, where they held the Tokyo Pride Festival, and the woman in white there on the float is the
Abe.
wife of the conservative Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe.
And she's known for her liberalism and AIDS work. And she said she had a fun time with smiles. That's probably a loose translation.
Interesting story from India, where they have come across an intersexed tiger. The tiger was dead. They were examining it. They noticed anomalous genitalia, and they're doing chromosomal testing to find out about this.
As we like to say on this show, it's only natural.
Well, the fact is that an intersex condition is fairly common among human beings, and it turns out it turns up in the animal kingdom too.
Yeah, now they've gotten close enough to a tiger to find out. Speaking of India, the United Nations has made a sort of Bollywood film on gay acceptance. Now, you can see this at unfe.org/the-welcome. It's part of their free and equal thing. The interesting thing about it, we're not showing it because it's in, I guess, in Hindi with some English subtitles, but you can look at it online. It stars Miss India, Selena Jatili, and the Indian star Imran Khan joined her at the press conference. So there's a lot of high-level support there. Get this all done and get rid of that sodomy law before this new government comes in, because it's going to be more conservative.
Fingers crossed. And fingers crossed for Brunei, where they're evidently delaying implementation of the death by stoning law for homosexuality. Yeah, that doesn't mean it's going to disappear, but it's delayed. It is not in operation yet, officially anyway.
In Crimea, which is now under the thumb of Russia, part of Russia, really, and at least as far as Russia is concerned, they invoked the anti-gay law there to ban the Pride March in Sebastopol that was to have taken place April 22nd to 23rd. On the other hand, the Ukrainian government withdrew an anti-discrimination bill because it included sexual orientation.
Right, and this should get them in trouble with the European Union and membership there, but that's been a little gray area for some countries too, because the European Union wants these Eastern European countries to join, and they're supposed to have non-discrimination laws.
They pass them in Romania, for God's sakes. They all pass them, and then they don't. And then they do terrible things.
They cancel the prides.
Right,
they
exactly.
violently attack. Boris Dietrich of Human Rights Watch who's been here, is warning that you're going to find homophobia in Ukraine no matter where you are.
Well, let's go to Central Europe, to Austria, which will be represented in the Eurovision Song Contest in Denmark, May 6th to the 10th, by drag performer Conchita Wurst, who was also known as Tom Newirth, 25. Should we show a little bit of that? Yeah, we have it there.
Yes, let's show a little of the entry from Conchita.
Waking in the rubble, walking over glass. Neighbors say we're trouble. Well, that time has passed. Peering from the mirror, no, that isn't me. A stranger getting nearer. Who can this person be?
Okay.
So as you can, Conchita is not the first drag performer in the Eurovision contest.
No, an Israeli Dana International won the contest in 1998.
But as you can imagine, the objection to Conchita
that was transgender rather than drag per se. But,
yes.
Yeah, this is more drag, as you saw. If you're listening on the podcast, Conchita's got a big beard.
Yes.
They used to call that gender F, right?
Yes. So Armenia, Belarus, and Russia are objecting to Conchita's participation in the contest.
Well, yes, Eurovision is a big deal all across Europe, and it's shown all across Europe, and they're saying, we want this segment edited out of the show when it's shown in our country.
So we'll see how that turns out.
No.
In Liberia, the Catholic Archbishop, you've complained a lot about the Catholic Church not speaking up for the homophobia.
Well, the Pope not speaking up against some of these bishops.
Well, the Catholic Archbishop in Liberia has now blamed the Ebola virus and everything else going wrong in Liberia on homosexuality.
All diseases are always blamed on hated groups. I mean, the old expression is, in France, syphilis was called the German disease, and in Germany it was called the French disease. I mean, it's that kind of stuff.
It's an attempt to distance yourself from it and protect yourself rather than dealing with it.
In South Africa, a former Army psychiatrist, Aubrey Dr. Shock Levin, was found guilty of torturing gay South Africans in Canada. He was convicted here, but basically for molestation things also. But during apartheid, he forced gay soldiers to undergo gender reassignment surgery and subjecting them to chemical castration, electric shock, etc. As many as 900 such reassignments were done in South Africa. It was part of a top secret program to root out homosexuality from the service. He was arrested in Canada, convicted of sexually molesting patients. He's starting a 5-year jail term.
5 years.
Not much for that kind of a. Well, I think that's for the molestation stuff.
Yeah. I remember this guy. Yeah. In Colombia, South America, the New York City Bar Association and the American University Impact Litigation Project have filed briefs on behalf of same-sex couples who are suing for marriage there. And they're citing the Windsor decision from the Supreme Court of the U.S. to say that LGBT people deserve human rights around the globe. They're trying to globalize the DOMA decision and bring it outside the U.S.
Just like Anthony Kennedy does over here sometimes.
Oh, and doesn't that get Antonin Scalia angry?
And in the United Kingdom, the coalition government there is split over opening civil partnerships to heterosexual couples who can only marry now, unlike same-sex couples who can choose between civil partnerships and marriage. David Cameron said it would undermine the sanctity of marriage, but his coalition partner Nick Clegg favors it. It's following a model that they use in New Zealand and the Netherlands. Peter Tatchell is pushing it over there.
AIDS news?
Yes.
Several items from GMHC here in New York, but let's start with California, where Medi-Cal, the state program of support for people, low-income people who need help, has made Truvada as pre-exposure prophylaxis easier to access, and that's a big step forward in making this more commonly used.
And here in New York, where GMHC has just selected a new CEO, Kelsey Louie, who comes over from Harlem United Community AIDS Health Center up there in Harlem. They are having a, with Mount Sinai Hospital on May 7th, we have a little chyron about this. It's from at 6 o'clock at their headquarters at 446 West 33rd Street, excuse me. They're calling it a prep rally. And
it's really a panel, a
asking
forum.
the question, have condoms failed us? Because infections are holding steady at around 50,000 in this country. Damon Jacobs is one of the panelists. He's a psychologist. He has been a, quote, enthusiastic Truvada user since 2011. He founded a website, and we have that as well. It's called prepalicious.org. But he says when people write there that they talk with their friends about responsible condomless sex, and they get shamed about it and called sluts because they're using a drug instead of a condom. Right. Now, there's good reasons to use condoms for because there's all kinds of other diseases you can be preventing. Yep. So, but
to each his own.
Right.
But that kind of personal choice and decision making should certainly be encouraged. And this guy, Kelsey Louie, is the
new head of GMHC.
Yes, and a man of color who is very experienced in the AIDS community, and that's considered a good step forward. People seem to be happy about his appointment as the new CEO of GMHC, particularly because there is concern that men of color having sex with men are not being addressed directly enough in the epidemic, and that they are overrepresented in the new infections.
Yes, and just to go over that again, the reason that men of color have higher infection rates is because fewer of them are getting tested and into treatment. And when you get treatment, you are less likely to be infectious. You are
well, your viral load is suppressed,
exactly.
and therefore you're less likely to transmit the virus.
That's right, and that's the key to getting this. That's the key to this whole campaign. End AIDS by 2020. Yes,
GMHC also has its annual AIDS Walk coming up, and before that, they have gotten together this scheme called Light Up New York, where they're getting not only the Empire State Building, but other buildings around New York to light up in red for awareness May 12th through 18th, that week before the AIDS Walk.
So when you see it in the sky, that's what red means.
Red buildings around New York.
We don't always know what the colors mean on the Empire State Building.
Yes,
but you
although
can go
there's
to
a website.
Yes, I was going to say.
All right, entertainment news.
Jodie Foster married her partner, Alexandra
Hedison.
Yes.
Daughter of David Hedison, who you probably don't remember.
Nope.
Alexandra is an actress and photographer who appeared on The L Word. And they've been together, and so they got married.
I'm going to talk about a bunch of plays, but the great out-gay actor Simon Russell Beale from England, his King Lear, which is at the National Theatre in London, is going to be in movie houses around the country May 1st and some other dates after that as part of the NT Live series. It's a very ferocious King Lear.
And the Pet Shop Boys are going to premiere a new work about Alan Turing, the Codebreaker, with the BBC Concert Orchestra.
Codebreaker during World War II,
Yes.
you know, protected us from the Nazis.
In July at Royal Albert Hall, the work is entitled A Man from the Future. That should be a major production.
Now, it was cross-dressing week on Broadway, for at least for me. So Harvey,
Were you cross-dressed on Broadway?
I'm always in drag. Harvey Firestein, we're all in drag, that's what I mean. Harvey Firestein's Tony-nominated we're also talking about the Tony nominations, we've got a picture of this. Casa Valentina, it tackles, get this, heterosexual men who cross-dress at a Catskills resort in 1962. I would call it The Girls in the Band, because it's got a lot of similarities to The Boys in the Band in terms of his thing, but there are solid performances, and I would say there's a lot to chew on in this.
Yeah.
Because it's you know, it has to do a lot of explaining. Everybody has to do a lot of explaining about what's going on and everything. So it was interesting.
Okay.
Neil Patrick Harris is a
Interesting enough to go see?
Yes.
Okay.
Neil Patrick Harris is a hit in the Tony-nominated Hedwig and the Angry Inch by John Cameron Mitchell. That's Neil up there, who John Cameron Mitchell, of course, made it a cult classic off-Broadway in a movie. This show and Neil have deeply devoted fans. The woman next to me, right from the start, before it started, it's the overture, she was going. And I'm not objecting to that. I like enthusiasm. And there was a middle-aged guy in front of her doing the exact same thing. And I'm sort of going, I'm not part of the club here, but, you know, it's a bit loud for me, but it's...
You'd never seen it, right?
I had never seen it, but that's the punk rock business, and he's probably a shoo-in for the Tony. Then I saw Martin McDonagh's Cripple of Inishmin, which I saw in London with Daniel Radcliffe, and they brought the whole cast over, and these people are brilliant. This I highly recommend. It's a great dark comedy. You will never feel sentimentally about the Irish again after you see this. It's a great production. And then Bill Bowman and I saw Harry Melling. He's another Harry Potter actor. He plays the sort of the doofy-looking guy there in Harry Potter. He wrote and performed this thing called Peddling. He's a peddler at Brits Off-Broadway at 59 East 59th. It's a sort of Beckettian soliloquy, Samuel Beckett, of a down-and-out 19-year-old. I found it quite heartbreaking, and it's only 50 minutes, and it's worth your while. Also on the Tony front, outgay Samuel Barnett was nominated for playing Viola in Twelfth Night, and Stephen Fry, who's outgay, was also nominated for that same show.
An interesting episode of Nurse Jackie this week where they went into a gay bar to give free bacterial meningitis vaccine.
Yeah?
Yeah. And a couple of these straight male doctors were dancing with the gay men in the bar. It was interesting that they decided the show needed a sort of social conscience. And I watched episode 2 of Faking It on MTV, the new half-hour sitcom about the two girls pretending to be lesbians, except one of them actually is. Oh. And it's holding up. I would recommend Faking It on MTV.
And I did see one other show at the New York Theater Workshop, Red Eye to Havre de Grace, which is about the last days of Edgar Allan Poe. All I will say about it is loud noises occasionally woke me up. I found it very sophomoric. Then I'm reading glowing reviews from other people, and I'm saying, I feel like a bit of a Philistine not getting this, but I thought it was sophomoric.
But we so often disagree with the mainstream reviews. Whatever. But we'll be back with more of that next week. So thank you for joining us. We will see you then.